I want to go back to the outbreaks, and you're talking about the diseases. You started down to tell us.
Well, there's a term called zoonosis,
yes.
and it means that it's a disease that moves from the animal population to humans. Ebola is zoonotic. Marburg is zoonotic. Avian flu, zoonotic. The Spanish flu was a type of avian flu, H1N1, and that killed up to 2.5%, some say 5%, of the entire world population. And it had a hemorrhagic component that you don't hear about very often because it caused people to bleed out.
Like Ebola. Like
Marburg. Ebola. Didn't know that, did you?
No.
H1N1 actually began in 1916, 1917.
Wow.
So 100 years ago, people were getting sick in China. Young people, people who shouldn't have been vulnerable to influenza. Chinese workers were hired by England, Canada, the United States, and France to work in their countries because all of the men were off to war. When these Chinese immigrants, these Chinese workers, were put on ships and taken around the world, they stopped at lots of ports. A lot of these young men were sick because H1N1 had been roaming China for a while. And these sick individuals got off at these ports. They made others people sick. When the soldiers came through, they got sick at these ports. When the workers arrived in Canada, England, France, eventually the United States, they made the local population sick. That's where Spanish flu came from, not from Fort Riley in Kansas.
And not from Spain.
No, well, of course, never did. A lot of people may think that, though, because of the name.
Oh, they do.
Well, I want to point out one thing that you brought out in a presentation you gave at a prophecy conference a few years ago, and this literally had people's jaws dropping, and they're taking notes like crazy, and that's what prompted the book, that the word translated beast in Revelation 6, when talking about this fourth horseman, is actually the diminutive form of the Greek word.
Therion.
Therion. So technically it means little beast or little animal, like
So
perhaps
it has both
a
meanings.
virus.
It has both meanings. It comes from animals, it's zoonotic, but because it's a little animal, it's a virus or a bacterium.
Wow.
And right now, there are diseases roaming around the world that are very frightening. Marburg has been taking off in Uganda. At least right now, there are 6 people who were sick. 3 are dead.
They're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to contain the plague Marburg in East Africa right now.
How does Marburg compare to Ebola?
It's much worse.
Oh.
Much, much worse.
Wow.
Also, the plague has been in Madagascar, and it's pneumonic plague, which means that when you cough, you spread it.
Yeah.
The Black
You
Death.
don't need fleas to spread this disease. And you saw this morning that, one of the ways it's being spread is because people dig up their ancestors who've died, their parents or loved ones, and they dance with them.
Yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
That's a practice in
scary.
Madagascar. They will bury their dead, and then they will dig them back up and dance with them before they're reburied. Apparently, that's a cultural phenomenon in Madagascar.
Oh, my
And government officials there are saying, hey, stop that, because that's how the disease is spreading. This is the Black Death that killed millions of people across Europe back in the Middle Ages.
Well, 1918, my research says that basically, in most places don't say this, but it's 100 million were killed at least by that plague you're talking about.
At least.
They called it the Spanish flu, I guess.
Yes.
And it wasn't.
But it was actually Chinese.
But see, I thought it was from the United States at the Army base because that's where they felt it came from, because that's where it landed in America.
That was patient 0 here.
Yeah.
But it was already around the world 2 years before it hit here.
So it wasn't Spanish. It wasn't U.S.
It was Chinese.
It was Chinese. Oh, my Lord. You know, but this is, the powerful thing is, however, that this flu happened in 1918 and almost 100 million people. Now, we figured out the other day how many people a fourth of the earth will be that will die from the fourth horse of the apocalypse. And I don't remember the numbers because it's like a billion or something.
Close.
Well, if it,
You're right.
yeah.
On the earth, and so there'd be
Yeah.
a fourth of that.
Yeah, almost 2 billion.
Almost 2 billion.